Hi, folks. Okay, what we have here is chapter 10, and I'm going to talk about a few of the specific topics regarding this section. First of all, I think the most important thing to take into consideration is that this whole section is about facilitating groups, and the whole function of groups is, you know, more often than not, especially when you think about things like public health education, or it can be in the financial industry, marketing, retail, whatever it is. Excuse me, you have people who come together and they're united by a mission, and they have different agendas, products, projects, things that they've got to pursue, strive for, and accomplish. And to be unified as a team is far more powerful than having people work independently on their own, where there's that potential of things like they don't have all the resources they need, or they may duplicate their efforts in comparison to others. So we develop different groups to accomplish our goals. And you want to take into consideration that part of the value of having these groups is that when you have leadership, and really powerful leadership, one of the most important things is the leadership will delegate responsibilities to other management. And the management then delegates the responsibilities to employees. So we don't want a situation where management feels compelled to control everything. If you're in a situation like that, that is a form of micromanagement, and that is not a healthy and not a positive environment, because it really stifles growth, it stifles creativity, and it stifles people from taking responsibility for their jobs, for their projects. So we want an environment that is empowering for the employees as much as it's empowering for the communities that we serve. So creating decision making really has to start kind of like at a grassroots effort, and then trickle back up to management. And to accomplish this is where you kind of put people together. You create these committees. Now, some committees are standing, meaning they're always there, and or they're consistently there, and they help guide or direct something that is very specific and persistent. So it has to have a level of longevity. Standing committee really implies longevity versus it being a project with a time frame and then it's done. These standing committees are going to include stakeholders, people who are involved in whatever the topic is. So for example, in the book, they talk about things like after school programs. So you would have representatives from different aspects of the after school programs who would be involved in the standing committee. So maybe it's going to be, some managers from different departments, or it might be representatives of the different departments for the managers. So maybe for an after school program, you have someone representing the school district, you have someone who represents the educators, someone who represents maybe nutrition support for the kids, maybe outreach, but you want to have these different representatives. Now, standing committee, as we identified, is something that is going to be more long-term, but you also are going to create in businesses, we have subcommittees. And the subcommittees have a little more direct contact and more knowledge and experience and active involvement, I would rather say, in whatever the topic it is. So for example, maybe you have for the after school program, you have a subcommittee that now is in charge of outreach, recruitment, trying to bring new children in. And in a situation like that, then you're going to have stakeholders who really can affect this process and who are affected by the process. So it's a dual purpose. For task-specific groups, now these are, oftentimes you'll hear about ad hoc committees or task forces. You'll see task forces come up frequently when you pay attention to the government. But task forces have been assigned to address something specific. And maybe a task force is to work on getting buildings up to code because there are some violations and they're going to address that. Or maybe a task force is going to focus on in-service education of employees on inequities among the population being served. All right. So they have a bit of a specialty that they're going to investigate and address the circumstance to make a difference. Ad hoc committees tend to be a quicker response to something that needs to be addressed immediately. So an ad hoc committee might be maybe some grievances were filed with a group, and this ad hoc immediate is going to address this to be able to present their results and facilitate creating change or aiding the company or group understanding what needs to be improved. Okay, we talked about task forces. Coalitions. Now, coalitions are large. This is where you have established groups that are coming together and they are sharing information. They're working together to create a bigger, to address a bigger need. So you want to think of something like maybe a coalition would be the American Heart Association and the American Diabetes Association. They could create a coalition. Or a coalition could be a school district with Head Start because they know that the children in Head Start are going to filter into the school district. So they create a coalition where they're working together. In your case, for the class, you have a coalition because you have two different public health education plans, and you're going to look at how you can. This is kind of where we do want that creep, where you can expand your outreach by working together with other groups to create a more powerful and comprehensive change. So as you guys go out and you explore, you're shopping around. I like to say it's like dating. You're shopping around though and looking at everyone's PSAs. You want to start identifying which you feel you could create a coalition with, where you can create a unified force of change for like communities. And you know, sometimes it's going to be I want you to think big picture, that for example, it may not you know, it may behoove you to have two diabetes groups come together because they're from different areas or they're targeting different ages in the demographic, like children versus adults. Or sometimes you might want to bring coalitions together that are not related, where maybe you're looking at diabetes and homelessness, or you're looking at homelessness and pregnancy. You know, there's different possibilities, but the point of a coalition is to create greater outreach and greater opportunity, yet still increase the power between the two. All right, whoops, the page is loading gradually. All right, now, when you have these different efforts, you also have other types of groups that can create change. And in this situation, this is where advisory groups, advisory as in advice. This is, you know, like let's say you've got your diabetes plan, or let's go kidney disease. You know, you've got your kidney disease and you want to communicate with people, and your outreach is maybe targeting alcohol consumption and abuse of alcohol. And you need, you know, you're going to develop an advisory group that's going to assist you in identifying, you know, giving you guidance in terms of what you want to tackle, how you want to tackle the information that you want to present. An advisory committee usually brings talent, knowledge, and skills to the conversation to guide you, because the concept is that they have information that you do not always possess, and they're going to advise you. Sometimes if you have a new initiative and you are looking to promote that initiative, then part of your advisory group might be someone from marketing. Or if you have, concerns like you're targeting dental health of children, maybe part of your advisory group is to include a dietitian for education component, or a lawyer even, if there are concerns about making sure that when you provide free services that you're not open to any liability. All right, planning councils and commissions now are like subgroups of advisory, because in this situation, these are appropriate specifically for government agencies versus your nonprofit agencies. Um, so it's just typical with commissions. They're going to be involved with boards and making directions that I'd like to say steer the big ship. And then let's see, what have we got here? Steering committees. Advisory groups are to give you the advice, right? Steering committees now are going to see that, let's say you are expanding your program to another town, then you would have a steering committee that would assist in that process so that there is a seamless execution of this new program in another town. And the steering committee is going to support you and aid you in this process to keep things moving on schedule. This is the beauty of that project plan. All right. Now, regarding effective group facilitation, being effective in a group is incredibly important, because you got to remember time is money. And when you're in a busy environment and you get called to a meeting, if it is an inefficient meeting, you're going to be falling asleep. You're going to dread it. You'll, for some people, that means they lose so much interest that they don't even bother to prepare anymore. So I definitely want you to think of, whenever you are pulling together a meeting, I want you to think time is money. Value the people's time. Make the experience positive, powerful, and efficient. All right. So how do you accomplish that? Positive, powerful, and efficient. Well, number one, being very succinct. Why are you pulling this meeting together? If you're just pulling it together because it is what it is and this is what you do every Friday, then really, wow. That becomes a real waste of time, especially for people who have deadlines or experiencing stress. So you got to ask yourself, first of all, is this meeting necessary? Will there be a powerful benefit for everybody? Because if the benefit is only for one person, let's say management, then they can call a really short meeting, and that would be like a status meeting to basically say, okay, anyone have any grievances? Anybody have any concerns? Everybody's on board. Okay, thanks, folks. That's a 10, 15, 20-minute meeting at the most. But if you have a meeting that is more structured, then there is an agenda and you have specific things to be discussing. So things that you want to consider is that, is this meeting going to be a continual topic, or will it be a temporary one? That should be identified. You've got to establish who needs to attend. Are we talking about all hands on deck in the department? Are we talking about representatives of each group? Or are we talking about stakeholders in whatever that topic is, people who are directly impacted by it? For example, it doesn't make sense for the marketing team to have a meeting that includes people from other departments if it's about development of marketing materials, right? So we have to pick and choose. However, if it is developing marketing materials and you know that it has to include a project manager, it has to include the authors, it has to include legal for review, then it might be that you have two different types of meetings. You have the internal one to oversee the project's movement, and then you have the larger group with the additional stakeholders to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Now, this has been, the idea of where the meeting is going to be, in-person, conference call, online. Obviously this has changed with COVID and everything now is pretty much online. Um, in the past, I will say absolutely that meetings were typically in person, but when you had people who were traveling, who were working remotely from home, oftentimes they would be individuals who would be calling in. Um, it's it's an okay experience. It's an option, and you'll just maneuver your way through that. Because it really depends on the construct and expectations of the employees at work. But if you have people who are in different time zones and different locations, you do have to take that into consideration when scheduling to make sure that to consider them in terms of access. And I mean, are you calling a meeting at 8 in the morning and they're in Hawaii and that means 5 a.m. for them? Wow, that stinks. Um, if the meeting is in person, you've got to take into consideration where's the best location. Obviously, if it's your department only, then that meeting is going to be on site, right? You're going to take advantage of maybe an office space that you have, or you would have a facility nearby that's available to you, but nothing that you would have to travel for. If the meeting is actually between different departments that are in different buildings, then again, you have to consider, do you have equipment? Do you have materials that are only existing in one building and you need everyone to go to that building? If it is a meeting between your group and let's say a client, if you're hosting it, typically then you would be the one to provide the environment for the meeting. But if it's a co-venture, then you coordinate with your cohort on the other end, which location would be appropriate, or whoever has the facilities available for the dates desired. I will guarantee you that you are inevitably going to have meetings where people are not all going to attend. This just is inevitable. And it might be that maybe they have a deadline and that takes priority. It might be that they have a sick kid that they got to go home to, or they're not feeling well themselves. They're on vacation. There's a myriad of possibilities. I mean, first and foremost, we always want to make an effort to schedule a meeting where we can capture as many people as possible. And you want to choose a day that will be honestly the least offensive, which means that if projects, for example, or meetings have a rhythm, then you want to try to get out of that rhythm so that you're not inundating people, for example, with Fridays being meeting day and they're in meetings all day long. Or if they have crazy deadlines on Mondays, then Mondays are not a good day to have meetings. So you want to take into consideration what the rhythm is of the people that would be involved. And it's not that sometimes you do reach out to people and say, hey, what's your availability, your best days and times, and you start building off of that if it's a repeating meeting. But it depends honestly on, to put it succinctly or directly, it depends on how high up they are in the food chain. And if you're low on the food chain, then you just buck up and you show up. You're told what to do. How long should meetings last? Well, first of all, you have to be reasonable because you don't want to lose people. You don't want to bore them. You don't want to take from their important time. So setting a meeting and being as efficient as possible is highly prized. So if it is a quote unquote check-in meeting, it really can be as short as like 15 minutes and might be done in 10 minutes. If it is a standard department meeting, it might be a small group one would be maybe 30 minutes. A standard department meeting would be anywhere from 1 hour to even up to 2 hours if there's a very intense and specific agenda. Sometimes when you have, let's say task forces or ad hoc committees, and they have a lot that has to be addressed, then they may have power sessions that take place all day long and they break for lunch. So you've got to consider really what is the function, the purpose of the meeting. Do any meeting plans inadvertently or unfairly challenge or limit participation of participants? Yeah, you know what, you guys, that is inevitable. I mean, as I said before, you're going to have circumstances where, people are traveling, they're in other states. There's a myriad of possibilities, and you try to accommodate them. And that's the beauty of the technology today, that they can do conference calls, they can do Zoom calls, they can be anywhere. But in order to do that, obviously, you need to give them as much advance warning as possible. Calling a meeting and saying, hey, we're going to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m., that's pretty darn uncool, and puts a lot of pressure on people to change their schedules last minute to attend. So it is better, especially if you have regular meetings, to book those out in advance, so then people could build their schedules around those meetings. All right, developing a productive agenda. Holy cow, yes. So you want to have a plan. You want to know what you're going to be talking about. You want to identify who the speakers are going to be, and you want to delegate time according to each topic and each speaker. So you really have to carve this out. You want to be clear as to what you want to accomplish in that meeting, because part of the meeting minutes is reporting on what those results are, so that people have clear understanding. Okay. So going along, I'm hitting just the really most powerful highlights of the book. And I still encourage you, despite my going over this, I strongly encourage you to still read this book, because it really is fabulous. And I don't have time to cover every minute, and how incredibly boring. All right. When you have a meeting, folks, you do want to have meeting minutes. It'll be really important. You want to have procedures. You want to have like an MC, a person who is going to oversee the meeting. They're the one who's going to coordinate everything, put it together, the information. They're going to have the meeting agenda printed out and either emailed or hard copy delivered to everyone at the meeting, so that they're able to follow along according to that agenda as what's being discussed and when. If you have people who are presenting, you obviously, you want to solicit information from them, then you'll want to let them know in advance, hey, I'm going to be expecting this information from you. Please be prepared. The person who oversees the meeting procedures, they may have a style already in place, or they may turn to management and find out if there is a protocol and expectation for the group of what type of meeting and meeting minutes are developed. Some are more structured and more formal. This is the idea of the Roberts Rules of Order. Utilizing things like quorums, versus some things are a little bit different with the Bobby's rules. So I'm not as worried about Robert's Rules of Order and Bobby's rules. Honestly, that was never presented to me in any of my jobs. However, when you have meetings, you do need to have some level of consensus and agreement. And you could, of course, pose to everyone yay or nay. Yes, that does happen. And when that happens, you have to document it. Or you simply look at it and everyone say, are we in agreement? Does anyone have anything that they want to say? And if no one speaks up, then that's on them. Now, you want to document everything. And why do you want to document everything? Because I will promise you, when people go to meetings and they go back to their jobs and do their things, they will not remember. They will not remember what that meeting was about, or what the final decisions or responses were. So you want to have some type of structure that is appropriate for organization, or for the person who documents the meeting minutes, that is conducive to the environment. When you have that, you will want to have, it'll start with your agenda of noting at what time you're discussing what topics. You want to include who is presenting that information. So we've got 3 columns so far. And then you also want responses. So anyone who makes comments, statements about what that agenda topic is, and any insight or questions that they raise regarding it, because then that generates the possibility of responding to them at a later date with solutions, or noting who has concerns or who has contributions. Like, what if the meeting is figuring out who can volunteer on the weekend to go build a house? And you conduct the meeting, if you don't bother to document, people's responses, then you don't know who to reach out to after the fact. So meeting minutes can be a really powerful tool when it comes to meetings. They're great because you can document them, you save them, and so people can come back after the fact and down the line and say, oh my gosh, we addressed this in the meeting, but we didn't follow through and identify where the breakdown was. Or maybe it had to be shelved temporarily because something that was this was hinging on was not available. So there are different possibilities to consider, but the most important one is making sure that we have this information documented. The person who oversees the meeting, coordinates it, is not the person who takes the meeting minutes, okay? And in my opinion, this has partially to do a little bit with filtering, that when we have an investment in the meeting, then we tend to hear what we want to hear rather than simply what is being presented. So I encourage that the person who does the meeting minutes, maybe it's a secretary, maybe it's an intern, volunteer, there's different possibilities, but whoever it is, you really want them to do nothing but document the facts and keep it as simple as possible, okay? Now, in terms of details of the meeting, does this sound corny? No, it really is important, all right? You want the meeting to be positive, okay? And so you want to take into consideration, do you have enough seats for everybody? Do you have enough table space or desk space? If you're having a meeting, you don't want to be schoolroom style where you're looking at everyone's backs. It's preferable that that meeting, everyone is able to see each other. So maybe you create a giant U in the structure of the meeting if it's in person. If your meeting is online, you have to determine the ground rules. Is it appropriate, is it fair for you to require everybody to be online visually? Or is it okay for them to have those blacked out rectangle tiles as the representation of them? That's a decision that has to be established. And then whatever that decision is, I guarantee you, you've got to stand by it forevermore. Because the moment you give an inch, people will take a foot. All right, so we have to consider things like the arrangement of the room. We have to consider, do we have enough seats? We want to take into consideration information. What if you have visiting people not familiar with the area? You need to have some form of signage for the restrooms so that they can find their way, or signage for them to find the meeting room, or some form of communication or ambassadors at the front door directing them so that they can get to the meeting. Someone raised the question, to the effect of, seriously, refreshments? Yeah, because for a couple of reasons. Number one, you guys, the brain is 75% water. So at the very least, you want to make sure that you have water on hand so that people can think clearly. But if you choose to offer things, amenities like coffee or tea, or having some fruit on hand, or finger foods or sandwiches, it does cost money. Depends on if it's in the budget. You have to determine, honestly, if the meeting is that important. I'm being literal. But part of it is human beings like free food and drinks. It just doesn't matter. We really like it. And you want to make it something that gives people a little bit of comfort and a little bit of distraction, so that if they feel a little awkward in the group, they have something to do, drink their tea. Something that's really, I want you guys to consider is, and gosh, I'll have to see if I could find the link, but there is, I came across this really great a coalition of people who came together standing for healthy meetings, meaning choosing foods that are healthy rather than the standard, old school grab a pizza and some sodas, and that's the meeting. And a variety of different organizations came together to help educate companies in how to construct healthy nutritious meetings. And it's cute because different companies sign on, pledging to honor this. And the reality is, this is kind of a breakdown I've noticed over the years is that, people like comfort food, like pizza, the soda, the junk food, the sugars. But the reality is, if you want a fully functional, healthy meeting, then you're going to feed the brains, the bodies with fully functional and healthy foods. Okay. Other things to consider if you want to. Oh, and this, oh my gosh, this is it down here, you guys. So the center, CSPI, the Center for Science in the Public Interest. Well, this isn't the one that I use, but hey, this is great. So they have one for healthy meetings on CSPI that you can reach. And I strongly recommend you guys go to this website and investigate. And my request, my being a dietitian public health educator, is please, wherever you go, please share this information, pay it forward to other organizations, even if it's meetings at school departments, whatever, because every opportunity that we can create change, we really are going to be on the path of creating a healthier nation. And it's a grassroots effort. It really does start with individuals, being consistent, making a stand and following through, right? Okay, participant identification. Well, there are two purposes to this. Number one, when you're not familiar with people, name tags are really helpful so that, you can open conversations, you can remember who they are. Nameplates are okay for putting on tables. Actually, that's a lot easier, whether they're disposable or reusable, for when you have people who come for one-off events that they're not normally there, maybe for like education classes. Versus just relying on the name tags, especially if the person is seated. The name plates work really great. They have ones that are just made out of paper. But if the people are mobile, like it's a cocktail event, they're up, they're moving around mixing, then the name tags are really important so that you know who in the world they are. It is always good that, part of that meeting minutes thing is to confirm who is in attendance. So taking attendance is key. And then you also have to consider other important things, like what if your meeting is in a secured building? Then you do have to know who is coming, when they're coming, to get clearance by security before they're able to enter. So that would have to be considered also. All right, the beginning of the meeting, honestly, you got to set a positive tone. I mean, I personally love to just dive in and nothing but the facts. But the reality is, like a comedian act, you do need to warm people up, and that means, hey, Sarah, how's it going? How's your puppy? Oh, hey, okay. Yeah, George, I heard about that at work. I'm really sorry to hear that. Okay. Just to connect with people on a human level, to be respectful, um, so that they feel valued and acknowledged. That just sets a more positive approach. When you go through a meeting and you're addressing your agenda, I will guarantee that you will have people who will have their own personal agendas. And they'll kind of go rogue and want to talk about something else. Or you have people who are very long-winded. And when you have a tight time schedule, this really interferes with your ability to meet your agenda. And things that you're going to have to be prepared for. And I might be jumping ahead, but let's go ahead and address this because I feel this is part of the end of the meeting, is that you've got to be prepared to keep people moving on. So to basically say, wow, Angela, I really like what you're bringing up, but this would probably be something that we should build into our next meeting so we can give it more time. Or Angela, it sounds like you and I should have a one-on-one about this so that we can harvest the information a little bit more before it's presented to the group. Uh, so we want to acknowledge a person that whatever they're saying, we want to be respectful, but we also have to manage the timing for the agenda and for the people, because we need to wrap it up on time. If the meeting is from 1:30 to 2:30, that means it needs to end at 2:30. Okay. You know, sometimes it might go 2:31, 32, 33, but because there are so many moving parts, different people with different needs, requirements, expectations, you really need to do your best to honor that time frame. And how you end the meeting is always letting people know that you will follow up with the meeting minutes being sent out to everyone, that you will have your next meeting. You should already have in place, unless it becomes a part of the meeting minutes, but you should have in place when the next meeting is. So a reminder, hey folks, I look forward to seeing you on blah, blah date at location. And, you know, if you have people who are going to contribute to the next one, it's not that you want to, you don't want to tackle them and address topics for the next meeting, but you can always give a little bit of a foreshadow of what's to come so that people can expect it. All right, a climate of inclusion. Folks, this is, you know, when if you're in a good department with a group of people working together, then inclusivity is already present. If it's not, then honestly, I will say it's endemic of the organization and there's a bigger breakdown going on. But inclusion in a classroom environment or meeting of people coming together, let's say if it's a city hall meeting, etc. Boy, if you've ever watched some of those city hall meetings, talking about exclusion, they can be terrible, and they're really good to watch to identify what doesn't work and what's going wrong. And that really kind of boils down to disregarding people, not hearing them, not, you know, helping them understand what the ground rules are so that, you know, because if you don't tell a person the ground rules, you're setting them up for failure, right? But if you let them know, we welcome, you know, hey everyone, we welcome people contributing. However, if we could just please establish the ground rules that we request that whatever you present be limited to 2 minutes. We ask that you please step forward, that you use the microphone, whatever that is. We do want to set people up so that they understand how to comply so that we are all successful in this experience. Okay, we talked about the importance of keeping on track. When you develop that agenda, you can even be very specific of identifying how much time is assigned for each topic. So if you're saying, okay, discussion about daisies, 5 minutes, trimming daisies, 3 minutes, you know, you can start to be succinct and breaking down. And that's really can be helpful in evaluating how much time you need for meetings. When people are not in the same physical space, that's what we were talking about earlier, the importance of taking into consideration different time zones and people having access to the equipment to be able to participate. Tips for effective group facilitation. Whoops. I'm going too fast and it's not loading. Okay. So they say here, have a genuine belief in the power of groups. You know, some people dread groups because there's a lot of different ideas and opinions that are floating around. But this is where I'm going to emphasize it is so incredibly important that if you need to review the mission at the beginning of every meeting to remind people why we're here and what we're all doing working together as a team, then do it. Okay. Because miscommunication can easily arise when people forget why they're there. And miscommunication can lead to anger, frustration, disrespect, and not trusting each other, which is really unfortunate. listening and being respectful, folks, just like in a classroom, that means no texting, no talking while someone else is communicating, listening to people, asking questions on things that you're unsure of if you need clarification. All right. Again, you might have ground rules where questions are only addressed at the end of a person's discussion or presentation. You might have, established ground rules where maybe you pass a ruler around as to who gets to ask a question. There's different approaches, but all of these do need to be established. Whatever it is, folks, we want to set the environment up so that it is professional, it is supportive, it is conducive to communication, to learning, and again, to fulfilling the mission. Okay. Commitment to capacity development. Okay, fine. Sense of humor. Yeah. It keeps things going. Okay, there you go, you guys. That is a discussion of as far as I want to take it for chapter 10, and we're using this one today as being a group lecture. On Thursday, I will go back and in the group setting, we will discuss more things to address with our meetings and what other people had posted as questions. Fabulous. Thank you.